So you're probably wondering to yourself right now, what in the world is Pinkworld? Well, Pinkworld was a WAD for SRB2 that I was making originally as a joke. It originally started out as a joke because I was making some project that sounded vaporwavy, and I kind of thought, well, what if I made this into an SRB2 WAD? For those that don't happen to know what a WAD is, it's kind of like a mod for Doom, as SRB2 is made in the Doom engine. No, not that Doom engine. Yes, that Doom engine. But through the process of making this, I was talking to a couple of buddies of mine who had actually started somewhat of a little game dev team over on Discord. And I thought, well, hey, why not I pitch this project a little bit to them, just in case, you know, like if someone happens to get burnout or something like that, you know, they don't want to work on the project that they're working on, they can move over to Pinkworld, maybe make a few things and whatever. This particular WAD would have been a vaporwave inspired WAD. I don't know if anyone's really ever done that yet, but I was thinking, you know what, I really like that kind of art style, so might as well make something. So originally I started making maps, and I'm not great at making maps. I can make maps in Doom, but not SRB2. They were pretty garbage. So we just kind of decided to start from the ground up. So a lot of this WAD isn't even anywhere near finished yet. The only things that have been done are the main hub world, the title screen, and a little bit of the first stage. That's about it, just because of the reworks and stuff like that. We do have a document that is sitting around that goes over what the stages are and what the little story that we happen to think up was, but as of writing this, development is kind of stalled, and for quite a long time. The last message in the Pinkworld discussion channel on the dev Discord was from November of 2021, so not a lot has happened. I want to say this now, though, that development hasn't been officially canceled, but at this rate, I don't think anything's going to really change. So I thought, why not just release the soundtrack, not let it go to waste, and explain a little bit of what these tracks are supposed to be and what these stages were meant to be like. So up first, we have the first thing that you would probably hear, which is the title screen music. I remade this a few times because the first one that we used as a bit of a placeholder wasn't really all that great. It used the same sample in the background, which is from a bit of a shitpost mod for Half-Life 2 called Kleiner Life. And I just used that as a bit of a background sample for this, just because, hey, that mod is very vaporwave inspired, and I thought, well, why not just, you know, be a vaporwave artist and just kind of copy someone else's stuff somewhat. but yeah, this would be the title screen music. So at the time of recording this, it's very clear that this was still meant to be a bit of a placeholder, as it does sound quite rushed. But this was going to be the title screen music. And up next, getting into the stages here, at least somewhat of a stage, as the first thing that you would see upon pressing the start button, so to say, would be a hub world called Pinkworld. You know, might as well use the namesake early. So this hub world was actually done. It's one of the few things that are actually done with this WAD other than the entire soundtrack and a few art assets and other stuff like that. We were planning on redoing it due to a shift in what the overall looks and style would have been, and that was probably the most recent hiccup that we ran into before all development just kind of slowly fizzled out. This project was also the first one that I had ever made for the game. It was actually what inspired me to start working on this whole hot mess back when it was a funny joke, a bit of a shit post, as one might say. The sample in the background here, actually I don't know the original source, as both sources I got were from SoundCloud, one from some random person and the other one from Flamingosis. I've tried to track down the original sample but never could. But this was the first project and first song ever made for this whole fiasco, as one might say. Really short tune, rather. I probably ran out of ideas, that's why it ended so quickly. But the next stage that you would see is a stage called Blue World, and I actually have remade this track completely and don't know where the old one went. But it was essentially a copy of some Nintendo DS games, like network screen, like when you'd be connecting to the internet for something. But afterwards, I essentially completely remade it, ripping off Washed Out, Feel It All Around. I didn't actually sample Washed Out. I used the original sample that he used. So technically, it's not copying Washed Out, if you squint hard enough. But these are Blue World 1 and 2. During this whole soundtrack, you won't really hear any boss music because we actually didn't plan to have any bosses during any of the stages. The boss would be at the end. It's one boss, and it's only if you win all of the special stages. So we weren't really even planning on having any bosses until right at the end, and only if you essentially 100% the game. So that's why you won't hear any kind of boss music. So what's going to happen after the first stage? Well, this one's a bit of a doozy. Originally, in the garbage mod that I made myself, it was originally called Straight Line Zone. Now, those Sonic fans who have played a lot of various fan-made stuff will know what Straight Line Zone is. It's a bit of a joke, and that's kind of the reason I had it in there. It was just Sonic running from left to right until the stage ends. It's just one straight line, and that's about it. It had some fancy black line textures that moved in the background, but that was about it. Now, these tracks are a bit lazy, as one might say. It's literally just a straight copy and paste job of another song from SoundCloud. This was the second track that I made in the whole project, so at that point I was kind of like, you know what, whatever, who's gonna care? It's just a funny joke wad that I'm making for my buddies. So we just kind of kept it just out of, hey, I'll probably redo it later. Now, this second stage is a bit different. During the development, when the team started to take it over, we thought, well, Straight Line Zone's dumb, let's not do that. The second stage is called Memory Bath, mainly because it was a copy of an old version of Green Flower 1, which is the first stage in SRB 2. Except it had those weird line textures all over the place. It was just covering the entire map. And the tagline for the stage, so to say, would be something's a bit familiar here, something to that effect. And when we started development of this thing, we essentially said Straight Line Zone's out, but Memory Bath 1, which is what Straight Line Zone was, is now going to be you running around in a circle while, you know, fancy, trippy vaporwave stuff went on in the background and in the skybox. I said, okay, sure. Memory Bath 2, well, that's just a bit of a pipe dream because we never really got to that point of making that stage. I think that there's probably something in the document about it, but I don't even remember. next here would have been a water stage. This was actually the last stage that I ever worked on in my mod version before the team started to help me out a little bit here. This one was probably the most serious one that I tried to do and that I actually tried to work on fully, but I just didn't have the know-how and the capability to really build something really nice looking in SRB2, and I didn't really get the result that I wanted. So I eventually just asked the team that I joined, hey, can you guys possibly help me out with this? And that's how I got where I am now, I guess. The second stage music was actually a bit of a placeholder. I've been looking to replace it for a long time. I just have never really gotten the inspiration to get anything that sounds any decent that would replace it. Essentially what we have right now is just a track that I was using to try and get that same feel, but I never really came up with anything that was any decent. So out of the soundtrack that has been done, that is the only thing that really hasn't, other than, you know, speed shoes or invincibility power up or anything like that. Those tracks haven't been really done either. So next up would have been a stage on the moon. This moon was actually red and orbiting above Pinkworld. Sadly, no level design was really done for this stage, so we don't have anything that I can really show you here other than pointing it out in the Pinkworld skybox if I happen to have an image. But this stage I was adamant that this stage was going to have water in it somehow. A moon that has low gravity and water, yeah, why not? After this stage, it was essentially just going to be a normal stage, point to point, you know, start to finish, as most stages in this WOD would be. And once you got to the end of the stage, you would essentially walk through like a gate type doorway, and that doorway would close behind you. Therefore, it would make it a second hub area. Now, previously, the two stages, Memory Bath and Blue World, those would teleport you back to the Pinkworld hub once you were done. So, hey, pick another door, go to another stage. This one, however, once you're done with the moon stage, you would essentially go back to the moon hub for the next few stages that would come up next. Nothing of either of these moon stages were ever really done. We never had any assets or level design or anything done for it other than the music and that document that we essentially wrote down what we wanted it to be. That just played was the moon hub music. So after the 3 previous stages, I forgot to mention Insulating Depths, which was a water stage that I mentioned a little bit earlier. But after those 3 stages, you would get to the moon hub, and you would have 3 more stages, which would be Cognizant Spiral, Mercurial Brilliance, and Pinkworld Reprise. Now, Cognizant Spiral was essentially, I envisioned it like a high-speed slide level. It'd be downwards about as high as you can get down to a lowest point that you can get for both stages. The person helping me out with level design didn't think that was really the best idea because 2 slide levels can get kind of boring pretty quick. So what they thought to do was essentially the first stage would be a lot of puzzles before you can progress downwards. And I thought, yeah, sure, why not? That's not too bad of an idea. The second stage, however, would be the one that I would like, which is a bunch of high speed where Sonic would roll in his little ball form down a slidey type of path, and it would be a bit of a challenge to get down to the bottom. So for these tracks, I don't 100% remember what the sample was, but of course it's another SoundCloud Vaporwave artist sample that I happened to nab off of this site at some point. The first one's a bit simple. It's mainly just kind of a chopped and screwed version of the original track, you know, just kind of taking little bits out of it, using that, and kind of making a little loopy-loop type of deal. The second one is a lot more complex, where, you know, I essentially resampled the whole thing, used my own instruments in terms of the drums and stuff like that. So here is Cognizant Spiral 2. So what stage is next, you might be asking? Well, what is next is Mercurial Brilliance. Really hard name to say, but this stage originally had a working title of Artsy because it was going to be essentially an art gallery. I had an idea of an art gallery that's essentially made of all wireframes, so you can essentially see through the walls a little bit, making it a bit tough to navigate. And this would also give our art team a bit of a moment to shine because, you know, it'll display little art things that they've done. Maybe I was thinking about possibly getting the community involved a little bit, the SRB2 community, maybe doing a little bit of art there. But that never sadly came to fruition. We got a little bit of a proof of concept done one night, but really, I don't have any images from that. It was never really put into the full game, so I don't really have anything to show of Mercurial Brilliance, really. I just kind of had an idea of what if Namco Museum became a SRB2 stage, so that was my idea for that. The sample behind this is I Cubed Adore. If you ever want to check out some really great lounge music, I'd check that out. But here is Mercurial Brilliance 1. This is one of the longer tracks. Both of these songs are quite a bit longer than most of the other parts of the soundtrack. The next song coming up here, Mercurial Brilliance 2, is actually my favorite out of the entire soundtrack. I had a bunch of fun making it. It was really, really nice. The only problem being is that the little bit at the end where it just kind of plays the sample out a little bit, I've gotten dinged on copyright for that a few times, so that's not too fun. But hey, you gotta make an omelet by cracking a few eggs. But here comes Mercurial Brilliance 2. So the story for these particular stages, if I remember correctly, is essentially taking place inside like a weird anomaly of space. So during Mercurial Brilliance 2, that anomaly is kind of falling apart. The level design person found essentially what is a bug in SRB2 on how it processes PNG files, which essentially makes weird like glitchy artifacts in the texture itself, and we were actually planning on using that to have like a weird glitchy effect to the floors and the walls and stuff like that. So that was what that was going to look like. So the next stage is actually the last stage coming up here, which is Pinkworld Reprise. Pinkworld Reprise was a big endeavor somewhat because, you know, it's the last stage, got to make it real cool. Pinkworld Reprise 1 would have taken place in the city of Pinkworld. It's a city, if I remember correctly from the document, that has always been asleep. It's essentially a dead city, as one might say. There's nothing going on. In the middle of this city, there is a massive tower. Pinkworld Reprise 2 takes place during that tower scene. And at the top of the tower would be a boss fight, or potentially nothing, depending on if you happen to get the special stages done or not. We actually plan to have the game loop back to the starting hub area if you didn't happen to get all the special stages done. But regardless, I'll go over a little bit more here in the future. So that was Pinkworld 1. At the end of that stage, you would go into the tower, and I actually planned on having like a little, I don't know what you would call it, a respite area where it's literally just a hallway with a staircase on the end, a big long hallway with a staircase on the end. And that's what you were hearing in the background while I was speaking before the song started, the Pinkworld 1 stage started. That little slowed down version of the Pinkworld sample just reverberated and kind of in the background there. That was Pinkworld Hallway. It's really not a whole lot to talk about. It's just, you know, slowed down sample, a bit of reverb, that's about it. Everything from the Moon Hub forwards, and actually technically Blue World forwards, we really didn't happen to have any artwork or stages stuff done, sadly. So I really don't have anything to show for Pinkworld 2, but the title screen actually does show the tower in the background. So that is essentially what you would be inside, and at the top would be a potential boss fight. But that aside, here is Pinkworld 2. So there you have it. A little bit of background behind Pinkworld, the game that will never be released, and a bit of its soundtrack along with it. I know that there are probably a bit of odds and ends that I'm probably forgetting, like the Top of the Tower music I know that I don't happen to have on my PC anymore, and possibly some options music as well, but that's all that I happen to have lying around. I just made this video because I thought I didn't want to have the soundtrack go to waste, and I might as well give it to people who want to listen to this stuff that I've made already. I want to thank you guys that happened to make it this far, and appreciate you for checking in on this kind of video and listening to my ramblings a little bit about what in the world the stages were and various things like that. If you ever happen to want to contact me about any of this, feel free to do that, and thank you for coming to listen to this for a little while.